So have you ever wondered what happens to a city after its main industry just disappears? Today we're digging into New England's old factory towns. You know, the cities built on textiles and manufacturing that, for a while there, looked like they were left for dead. But this isn't a story about decay. It's actually a story about a pretty incredible transformation, a real post-industrial rebound.
Just take a look at this. This is the historic mill yard in Anchester, New Hampshire. What used to be the largest textile complex on the entire planet is now a buzzing hub for biotech and advanced manufacturing. I mean, this one picture tells the whole story, how these industrial relics were completely reinvented into engines for a new economy. So how on earth did they pull this off? Well, to really get the comeback, we have to first understand the collapse. And yeah, to really appreciate the comeback, you have to understand just how far these cities fell. We're not talking about a minor downturn here. This was a total collapse of their economic identity, and it happened over decades.
For almost 100 years, New England was basically the manufacturing heart of America. But after World War II, it got hit with a one-two punch of global competition and automation. And because cities like Lawrence, Worcester, and Manchester were so dependent on just one or two industries, they were incredibly vulnerable to these huge shifts in the labor market.
And this wasn't some quick shock to the system. No, it was a slow, painful bleed that lasted 30 years. By 1970, the so-called Golden Age was officially over, and that kicked off a long, brutal period of job loss. The 1980s were the absolute bottom, what some people call the industrial nadir, when factory gates were just shutting for good. By the year 2000, these proud industrial cities were grappling with a lost identity and a population that had seriously dwindled.
But here's the thing. The collapse wasn't the end of the story. It was more like a turning point, and out of those ashes, a new economy started to take shape, really following three different and honestly fascinating paths to recovery. These weren't just stories about survival. They were about strategic, calculated reinvention. Okay, so the first and probably most powerful strategy was what's known as the EDS and MEDS model. The idea is pretty simple. If the factory jobs are gone for good, you replace them with careers in education and medicine. Universities and hospitals basically became the new economic anchors, the modern-day version of that huge mill in the center of town.
Worcester, Massachusetts is the textbook example of this. The city really leaned on its powerhouse institutions, like UMass Medical School and WPI, to completely reinvent itself. But here's the crucial part. Worcester didn't try to become the next Boston. Instead, it cleverly positioned itself inside the greater Boston innovation economy. It offered things like cheaper R&D space that its bigger neighbor couldn't, all while holding on to its roots in advanced manufacturing, especially robotics.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The data proves it. Just look at Worcester's top employers. The list is completely dominated by healthcare and education. UMass Memorial Health, the UMass Medical School, St. Vincent Hospital. It's clear as day. The factory has been replaced by the hospital and the university.
But EDS and MEDS wasn't the only path forward. Manchester, New Hampshire took a slightly different route. They took their most iconic asset, that historic mill yard, and turned it into a hub for one of the most futuristic industries you can even imagine, biofabrication and regenerative technology.
And the scale of this whole thing is just staggering. The city's Region Valley Tech Hub is projected to create 9,000 new, high-skilled jobs. A huge goal of the project is to connect residents who've been historically left out with jobs in these new innovation sectors. It's a huge bet on a new industrial identity, built literally on top of the old one. But while these huge top-down projects were reshaping the city skylines, there was a third, absolutely vital engine of revitalization happening right down at the street level. This quote really gets to the heart of it. The tireless, around-the-clock work of immigrant entrepreneurs who breathed life back into neighborhoods that had been forgotten.
In cities like Lawrence, Massachusetts, what you see is a story of immigrant-led small businesses that literally stabilized a declining population. As longtime residents moved out, new communities moved in, opening up shops in empty storefronts. Dominican-owned businesses, for example, doubled in the 1990s. They created this bustling commercial scene and, importantly, reinvested their money right back into their own neighborhoods. This was a true, bottom-up, grassroots recovery.
But, and there's always a but, right? This incredible rebound, this amazing success story, it has come with a price. The very forces that saved these cities have now created a new and really complicated set of challenges.
And that question gets right to the heart of urban development all across America. This new phase, which some people call fifth wave gentrification, raises a really tough question. What happens when a city's revival starts pushing out the very people who held everything together during the hard times?
A huge part of this new pressure is coming from shifting demographics. You see, back in the 2010s, millennials really helped fuel that urban revival. But now, as they get a bit older, a lot of them are looking for more space and affordable homes out in the suburbs. And that migration is putting incredible strain on the housing supply in these newly popular legacy cities, which of course drives up prices for everybody.
To really wrap your head around this new crisis, you have to understand this term, a cost-burdened household. It's a really simple but brutal metric. If you're spending more than 30% of your income just to keep a roof over your head, you are officially cost-burdened. And that is the central number in this whole new affordability crisis.
Providence, Rhode Island is a perfect, if painful, example. Its revitalization was celebrated everywhere. It became a nationally recognized, cool city. But all that success acted like a magnet for real estate investors. And now, the same long-term residents who stuck it out through all the bad years are facing skyrocketing rents and a very real fear of being pushed out of their own neighborhoods. And this shows just how quickly a good thing can fuel a crisis. Over in Central Falls, Rhode Island, new commuter rail access to Boston kicked off this vicious cycle of speculation. For a city with a 30% poverty rate and very few homeowners, this sequence is incredibly dangerous. The new transit leads to speculative investment, which leads to rent hikes, which creates an extreme risk of displacement for the people who live there.
So all of this, the eds and meds, the new tech hubs, the rising rents, it brings us to the central and so far unanswered question at the very heart of this entire urban transformation.
And this is the ultimate policy challenge, isn't it? Is it actually possible to revitalize a city, to bring in new jobs and new investment, without pushing out the community that was already there? Can these legacy cities actually achieve development without displacement?
Ultimately, it just boils down to this fundamental conflict. Who gets to benefit from a city's success? Is it for the long-term residents who stuck it out through decades of decline? Or is it for the new wave of knowledge workers who are drawn to the city's newfound success? Right now, these cities are really struggling to find that balance.
Which brings us right back to where we started. The old mills are humming with activity again. They're filled with new life, new tech, and new promises. But as we look at this scene, we have to ask the most important and maybe the most difficult question of all. Who are they full for?